Welcome to NEET Biology Capsules. Today we are going to learn about Hardy-Weinberg principle, which is one of the important concepts in chapter evolution of NEET. So what is this principle about? This principle is about showing or representing how the population shows evolution and at what rate. There were two people, Hardy, who was a mathematician, and Weinberg, who was a great physician. These both individuals were working on population genetics, and they both were interested to understand how the allelic frequency vary or changes or show alteration from generation to generation. So they were people who were trying to understand what were the different factors, especially evolutionary forces, which can alter these frequencies. So according to Hardy and Weinberg, after careful study, they stated that the allelic frequency or genetic frequency tends to remain constant from generation to generation. It remains constant from generation to generation until and unless there are certain evolutionary forces that are acting upon the population. These forces can be mutation, gene migration, natural selection, genetic drift, and selective mating, which will be learned in some other video. But let's understand what is this with the help of example. Suppose there is an island. There are two types of bug or beetle population, one with red colored wings and one with white colored wings. The red being the dominant one, that is dominant phenotype, and the white one being the recessive phenotype. And let us consider there are 1,000 individuals in this population. As you know, there are three genotypes. That I am going to write about. That is capital R, that represents homozygous dominant individual. Capital R, small r, that is heterozygous individual but with the red colored wing. So these both will have red colored wing. And the small r, that is homozygous recessive, which will possess white colored wing. Now, if you try to apply this principle of Hardy-Weinberg, let us assume that in this population, homozygous dominant individual are 160, homozygous recessive are 360 individuals, and heterozygotes are somewhere around 480. So if I need to calculate the frequency of capital R, you have to see the population that has capital R. Here homozygous dominant and heterozygous have capital R. So frequency of dominant allele, in our case it will be R. For understanding purpose I'm just using A, but in our case it will be capital R. So it's a general representation. So 160 into 2, as one person has two dominant R and there are total 160 people, I mean individual, so 160 into 2. Similarly 480 people will have only one R. Each person will have only one R, so 480 into 1. Total number of population is 2000. I mean 1000, so allele will be 2000. What is this 160 represents? 160 represents the number of individuals with homozygous R. So we're just going to multiply because each individual will have 2 R. That's why we are going to multiply. But in case of heterozygous, there is only one capital R. So we are not going to multiply it by 2. We will be keeping it as it is. And this represents total alleles in that population. If person are 1000, allele should be double. When we solve this, we get 320 plus 480 upon 2000, which comes somewhere around, the final answer comes around 0.4. Now, instead of writing again and again frequency of dominant allele, we usually represent it by small letter p, and it is supposed to be 0.4 as we saw. Similarly, if we calculate it for recessive allele, which is represented as Q, we get something like this, where 360 into 2, the 360 is the number of homozygous recessive individual, but since each will have 2 small r, we are going to multiply it by 2. And 480, since heterozygous will possess only 1 small r, we are going to multiply it by 1. And again, the total number of population is 1000, so total number of allele will be double, that is 2000. Now when we solve this, we will get 720 plus 480 divided by 2000, which comes around somewhere 0.6. Therefore, in our case, Q, that is frequency of small allele, that is recessive allele, is 0.6. So I'm just summarizing it. Now, if you see some of these frequencies, that is dominant allele and recessive alleles frequency, will add up to 1. And that is what Hardy-Weinberg wanted to express, that the allelic frequency of a population remains or tends to be constant from generation to generation if there is no factor acting upon. Hardy-Weinberg help us to identify or analyze if the population is not evolving or evolving. If the equilibrium, that is the value of P plus Q, is disturbed beyond 1 or it is varying from 1, that means the population is evolving. So P and Q are the allelic frequency that are important factors to understand how population evolves. Now let us assume that if we square P plus Q, we get a binomial expression that we have learned in our younger, smaller classes, earlier classes, lower classes. P square plus 2PQ and plus Q square, which equals to 1. Where this P square is actually representing the frequency of individuals with dominant allele. Try to understand, P is frequency of allele, but P square is frequency of the person, the number of persons that are present in that population. Similarly, 2PQ is the frequency of person and not the individual allele. It is the frequency of person or individual. It is not the frequency of allele. Likewise, Q square also represents the frequency of that person which has recessive allele. And even that equals to 1. We will see some extra sum in some other video. We will see the application along with 5 to 6 problems based on Hardy-Weinberg. Till then, thank you.